"Stay away from the fence," Mark said in a low, firm voice, but full of a silent respect for that animal that seemed more like a living weapon than a dog. The echo of barking reverberated throughout the hallway of the private residence of billionaire Alejandro Salgado, the richest man many of those security guards would ever see up close. Upstairs, glass, marble, and luxurious silence reigned. Downstairs, in the basement, only steel, the smell of disinfectant, and the acrid stench of fear, sweat, and the lingering gunpowder residue that Rex still carried in his fur. He was sniffing the air. Smell of hot metal. It smells like leather. The smell of a nervous man. The smell of distant rain. The thought of rain made Rex's chest tighten as if an invisible hand were suddenly squeezing it. Images that weren't images, but flashes, glimpses, tore through the darkness of his mind. A sandy field, shouts in another language, explosions. A smell stronger than anything else. The smell of the man who was his human, his mate, his world. Ethan! That word wasn't a sound, but a taste he recognized at the back of his tongue, as if he could still feel the man's sweat on the tactical collar around his neck. He barked again, shorter, a warning. The hallway responded with a cold echo. This place wasn't the same anymore. This smell didn't resemble the memory of dust and fire, but the fear in the bodies around him was the same. Fear of getting closer. Fear of making a mistake. Mark raised his hand. "Loosen the leash, Morales." His eyes remained fixed on Rex. "Are you crazy?" whispered one of the youngest security guards, tightening his leather belt even more. "That guy already sent 2 to the hospital, and that thing at the training camp." Mark turned his head just enough to look at him. "Who asked for your opinion?" Morales swallowed hard and slowly released the leash, as if dropping a detonator. The leather fell to the ground with a thud, and for a moment Rex stood motionless, feeling the absence of tension in the collar. The world tilted slightly. Freedom always came with a command. He waited. Nothing. All that could be heard was the distant dripping of water from the ventilation system and the electric hum of the fluorescent lights. He took a step forward. 1 second. 3. Each movement caused the men behind to retreat half an inch. Mark was the only one who didn't move. He felt a slight knot in his chest when he saw the scars on Rex's snout, marks of someone who had lived through more wars than many human soldiers. His file read, "Former military dog. Areas of operation 3. Handler killed in action. History of severe trauma. Aggressive. Not recommended for family rehabilitation. Recommended only for confinement with a specialized team." Mark read that report 20 times. And yet, when he looked into those eyes, he felt he was looking at something broken that, paradoxically, still wanted to protect everything it loved, even though it couldn't remember exactly what it was that it had loved. "Rex," he murmured, letting the name slip out slowly, without order, without imperative, like someone calling to a forgotten old friend. "Relax, buddy. You're safe here." The word safety meant nothing to the dog as a concept, but there were other things. The tone, the cadence, the breathing. Something in Mark's voice resonated in a dull corner of his memory where ancestral echoes still lingered. "Good boy, Rex. We're going home." The memory passed as quickly as it came. In an instant, the muffled roar of the helicopter, Ethan's hand brushing against the back of his neck, the feeling of mission accomplished, the taste of smoke, the smell of blood, and then thunder. The thunder that wasn't thunder. Rex grunted, and the world returned to cold metal and smooth surfaces. The man in front of him wasn't Ethan. The smell was different, older, tired. It smelled of coffee, of cleanliness, and of a faceless sadness, but with an unbearable weight. Even so, that man did not give up. The dog tilted its head. Mark felt this small gesture as a tiny victory on an impossible battlefield. "Well," he whispered to himself, "at least he's listening to us." Up there, in the other reality, Lily gripped the worn strap of her backpack tightly. Her slender fingers were marked by the old stitching that was already beginning to come undone. The bus driver had just shouted, "Last stop, girl, everyone get off." As always, she was the last to get up. The weight of the city enveloped everything. Towering buildings, expensive cars, people walking too fast. But none of it truly belonged to her. Her worn-out sneakers, faded t-shirt, and hair pulled back in a makeshift ponytail made it clear that Lily didn't belong in that part of town. However, there it was. With the crumpled paper in his pocket, the address written by his mother, Salgado Foundation, Canine Rehabilitation Center, and Veterans Family Support. Emily's shaky handwriting still shone in Lily's eyes. Her mother hadn't cried while writing, but her voice faltered. "It's just a visit, Lily. You know we can't promise anything. They might not even let you in." But Lily knew, from a place she couldn't explain, that she had to leave. He got off the bus, the engine dying down behind him, and stood for a moment staring at the immense gate of the Salgado complex. The chrome letters gleamed at the top. Salgado Security and Canine Center. Armed guards, cameras, a discreet display of luxury disguised as philanthropy. Alejandro Salgado's smiling face was emblazoned on a banner near the main entrance, shaking hands with a police officer and posing with a black Belgian shepherd on a service leash. Lily held her breath. Her eyes were fixed on the dog in the photo. Dark fur, amber eyes, the small scar near the snout. His world was shaken. "Dad," she whispered, but instantly realized her mistake. Dad was the man, not the dog. Yet in her 8-year-old heart, those two figures had always gone together. Her father in his uniform, the dog by his side, both smelling of desert dust and the cheap dog food he insisted on bringing home so as not to upset Rex's stomach with human food. He blinked several times. Was it just another dog? Maybe, maybe not. His chest hurt at the thought. He walked toward the door. A burly security guard crossed his arms. "Where are you going, girl?" "I've come to see the dogs." Her voice came out firm, with a working-class accent, but without trembling. The man let out a soft chuckle, not out of malice, but out of disbelief. "Here at the zoo, huh? This is a private center." "It's from the Salgado Foundation," he replied, taking the paper out of his pocket and showing it to her. "My dad he was a soldier. He works with a police dog. My mom says that I help veterans' families here. I just want to see you." The word caught in her throat. Check what? Check if the one in the photo was really him? Check if she hadn't gone mad dreaming about the same dog every night, feeling a warm snout against her hand in her dreams, hearing a distant bark when it started to rain? The security guard glanced at the paper, grimaced as if he didn't want to get into trouble, and looked over his shoulder toward the glass entrance. The receptionist, a woman in a light-colored jacket, watched the scene with a frown. "It's a girl, Carlos," he said over the intercom. "Let her in. Let's see what she wants." "Okay, honey, but if someone tells you to leave, you leave, okay?" Lily nodded so forcefully that her ponytail almost came undone. The gleaming marble floor reflected everything beneath her slender feet. She felt even smaller, even more out of place as she crossed the corridor lined with trophies, photos of heroic dogs, and framed medals. On one of the walls, a plaque read, "To the heroes who didn't return, now to those who returned with invisible scars." She stopped when she reached that sentence, her eyes filling with tears. She couldn't read it all so quickly, but some words caught her attention. Heroes. No. Scars. The father's face seemed unbothered, as if he had just walked out of the kitchen door carrying his helmet under his arm, saying with that half-guilty, half-proud smile, "It will only be for a while, Princess. When you return, we'll go to the beach, I promise." The promise was never kept. "Can I help you?" The receptionist's soft voice interrupted the thread of memory. Lily turned around, adjusting her backpack strap again. "I'm here for the foundation. My dad's name was Ethan Miller. He died in the line of duty with a military dog. My mom says the best way to come back is through the dogs, and—" her gaze fell on the pictures of dogs on the walls. "I just want to know if any of them is named Rex." The name came out in a reverent whisper, as if pronouncing the name of a saint. The receptionist blinked in surprise. The story being whispered through the corridors was about the monster of Block C, the Belgian shepherd that not even the most experienced trainers had been able to fully tame, the one who had arrived from a military base with more paperwork than anyone had ever seen. Rex. "Wait here a moment, okay?" the woman said. "I'm going to call Mr. Mark." In the basement, Mark was finishing another controlled approach exercise with Rex. It was always the same. He would go in, take 2 steps. Rex would bark as if he were going to tear the air apart, threatening to attack the grate. And then, very slowly, in a low voice, Mark would calm him down, anchoring him to the present. "There's no explosion here, buddy. Listen to my voice. Feel the ground beneath your feet. Listen." He paused. "Just the fan. That's all. You're not there. It's over." Rex didn't understand the words, but the tone, the rhythm, the scent of that man who approached without fear, all of it created a tenuous thread of new reality that he could cling to for precious seconds. But all it took was a distant clap of thunder, a flag hitting the outside flagpole, or even an object falling in the hallway for everything to fall apart again. A metallic clang, and Rex found himself back in the very depths of hell. The ground trembled. Ethan was shouting something he couldn't hear over the ringing in his ears, the taste of dust, the smell of warm blood. He remembered running. He always ran toward that man's voice, but that day the voice was gone. The moment Ethan's body fell, a white wave of noise engulfed everything. After that, he had encountered only cold orders, unfamiliar hands, and the smell of fear, not the right kind. The only acceptable fear was that of the enemy outside. He knew how to recognize that. But the fear in the uniformed men who now surrounded him was of a different nature, fear of him. Mark took a deep breath. "That's enough for today, Rex." He was about to leave when the intercom in his pocket vibrated. He answered, annoyed. "He speaks." "Mark, this is Carla from reception. There's a girl upstairs asking about the dogs. She mentioned a name," the woman's voice faltered. "She asked about a dog named Rex." He felt a knot in his stomach, as if someone had punched him. He looked at the animal on the other side of the fence. Rex, at that moment, was panting, his muscles trembling slightly, but his eyes remained alert, as if he were waiting for the world's next attack. No one outside the team knew his name. In the system, in internal files, on identification tags, he was K917C. The name Rex was only mentioned in military reports that Mark persistently sought out, and in a few private conversations with Emily, the trainer's widow. Emily. The image of her gaze lost and her hands clutching a cup of coffee that was cooling without her ever drinking it, flashed briefly through Mark's mind. He shook his head, returning to the present. "How old is he?" he asked. "I don't know. Maybe 8 or 9? He's from far away, you can tell. And, Mark," Carlo lowered her voice, "he said his father's name was Ethan Miller." It was like hearing a ghost knocking on your own door. Mark closed his eyes for a moment. Rex's scent enveloped him. Fear, adrenaline, and, deep, deep down, an almost erased trace of a sweet, childlike smell, something like cheap soap and crayons, stored in a corner of the dog's olfactory memory whose existence was unknown to everyone present. "I'm leaving," Mark said. He went outside, then turned around and faced Rex once more. "Don't worry, my friend. Maybe things will change a little today." Rex only blinked, but for a moment he didn't bark. The silence in the hallway felt as if another animal were breathing beside them. Upstairs, Lily stared at the glass of water Carla had offered her. She didn't touch it. She was used to rejecting kind gestures she might not be able to accept. At home, Emily always said, "We don't owe anyone anything, Lily. Their help comes with a promissory note." But it was about money, favors, back rent. Not about water. Not about the chance to see, even for just a minute, that dog that had haunted her dreams ever since her father failed to return. When Mark stepped out of the elevator, Lily scrutinized him with the speed of someone who learned to read adults before she learned to divide fractions. He looked tired. Not the tiredness of someone who hadn't slept well, but the tiredness of someone carrying an old weight on his shoulders. The polo shirt with the Foundation's logo, the subtle dark circles under his eyes, the unshaven beard. He also observed her silently, her worn shoes, her scraped knee, the backpack with a cheap bone-shaped keychain dangling from the zipper, probably a souvenir from a fair, and, above all, her eyes. Those large, dark eyes that shone with a dangerous mixture of hope and pain. "Are you Lily?" he asked, speaking slowly in Spanish, as if he didn't want to seem distant. "I'm Mark. I work with the dogs here." She raised her chin. "Yes. Do you know a dog named Rex?" Her heart raced. She decided not to lie, but she couldn't just leave the boy in Block C as if it were a school visit. "Yes, I know a Rex, but he's a very special dog and very complicated. He's not a family dog, you understand?" He looked her in the eyes. "Why do you want to see this dog?" Lily bit her lower lip. The air felt heavier. "Because," her voice trembled, but she didn't run away. "Because my dad worked with him. He always talked about Rex. He decided that he was his partner, his hero. When Dad didn't come back," she swallowed hard, "I thought Rex was going to come back too, but when I saw the picture, he wasn't there anymore." She nodded toward the banner at the entrance. "I think that's it. I feel like you are too." Mark felt the hairs on his arms stand on end. She remembered Ethan in the blurry training videos, laughing, tossing the tactical ball to Rex, praising him, calling him "my boy." She also remembered the simple funeral ceremony, the folded flag they gave Emily, her empty gaze. Lily, back then, was just a little girl clutching a doll, not understanding why everyone was so sad. "I wasn't sure if Emily would like it, but Emily wasn't there at that moment." "Does your mother know you've come here?" he asked. Lily hesitated for half a second. I said maybe we could come sometime, but I had to work today," she shrugged. "Anyway, if you don't want me to see Rex, then leave. I just wanted to know." There was something about the way he spoke of knowledge that cut like glass. Mark took a deep breath. In the end, it turned out to be the technical manager of Block C. He was the voice everyone followed when it came to Rex. And there was something about that small, thin figure in front of him that was very similar to the look in his own dog's eyes when he found him howling alone one night, his snout pressed against the fence, staring at a point that wasn't there. Perhaps, just perhaps, those two looks were connected. "I'll do the following," he said, now in a slightly more formal tone. "I'll show you the center, the other dogs, and explain how it works. And, in the end," he looked her in the eyes again, "if I think it's safe, I'll take you to him. But you have to do exactly as I say, okay? Not a single step without my permission. It's very, very dangerous." Lily nodded without hesitation. However, something inside him whispered the opposite. Dangerous for whom? As the elevator descended, Lily's heart sank with it. Each floor displayed on the digital screen seemed to bring her closer to something her whole body recognized, even though the logical part of her mind told her it was madness. She closed her eyes for a moment. The smell of wet earth. The smell of leather from the neck. The weight of a dog's enormous head rested on her legs as she drew on the backyard floor, still very small, with her tiny hands covered in chalk. Her father sat nearby, laughing, saying in Spanish with that forced American accent, "Rex, take care of my princess, okay?" She was so small she barely remembered the words, but she did remember the soft bark, like a promise. The elevator stopped with a slight jolt. As the doors opened, the world changed again. The gleam of marble gave way to the gray of concrete, the smell of disinfectant, and, beneath it all, the strongest and most intense smell of all, that of dogs. A symphony of barking erupted as Mark swiped his ID card through the reader and opened the first security door. Several dogs in their individual cages raised their heads, some wagged their tails, others simply watched, assessing. "These people here are in advanced rehabilitation," he explained. "Some came from the streets, others were involved in police operations. Many have a difficult past, but," he shrugged, "most manage to adapt with time and patience." Lily looked at them all intently, murmuring, "Hello," softly, her fingers eager to reach through the bars and touch her fur, but obeying the instruction not to do so without permission. None of them had those amber eyes. None of them managed to make his heart race. "And," he began, barely concealing his impatience, "the other one? The Rex?" Mark pursed his lips. "Before I take you with him, you need to understand something," he said, stopping in the hallway in front of a heavier door with reinforced glass. "This dog, he lost everything in an explosion. He lost his human. Since then, everything smells like danger to him. Any loud noise makes him relive the worst day of his life. Do you understand?" She remembered the worst day of her life. The day 2 uniformed men knocked on the door. Her mother collapsed to the floor, and her doll fell from her hands. From then on, any knock on the door made her heart race just the same. "I understand," he replied simply. Mark looked at her as if he were seeing an 8-year-old girl speaking with the seriousness of a 40-year-old. He turned the lock, entered a code, and swiped his card. The door opened with a loud click. The next hallway was quieter. There weren't several dogs, just one, and its presence filled the entire space. Lily sensed it before she saw it. A shiver ran down her spine. She heard the soft scraping of fingernails against the ground and felt rapid breathing. When the kennel came into view, the first thing she noticed were the eyes, amber eyes, focused on it. Rex's body tensed completely. His sense of smell, accustomed to exploring the world through aromas, was struck by a wave that made everything around him disappear for an instant. The smell of a child. But not just any smell. Cheap soap. A touch of colored pencil. A little bit of backyard dust. That smell existed somewhere deep inside him, stored along with other things he no longer wanted to remember. A man's laughter, the sound of a bouncing ball, a high-pitched voice calling, "Dad, look!" Rex growled, a low, muffled sound. This was not the field. This wasn't the backyard. This was not the house that smelled of coffee when the man took off his uniform. But the smell was the same. Lily felt her legs tremble. The dog before her was larger than she remembered from her fragmented memories. More muscular, tougher, with a more intense gaze. The scars told stories she didn't know. But something, hidden beneath it all, whispered to her, "It's him." "Lily, stay behind me," Mark said instinctively. He took a small step to the side, not backwards. Their eyes met intensely. For a moment, the whole world was silent. Through the bars, Rex saw not only an unfamiliar girl, but overlapping glimpses. An even younger girl, sitting cross-legged on the floor, drawing. He remembered lying down beside her, feeling her fingers curl in his fur, hearing the man's voice. "Relax, Rex, you're a princess. Relax." Back then, I didn't have any scars yet. I didn't yet know the sound of an improvised explosive device detonating just a few feet away. I didn't yet know what it was like to return to base without the comforting weight of that hand on the back of my neck. The smell of the child in front was the same, only stronger, mixed with fresh tears, with fear, with stubbornness. Something stirred within him. Mark saw this movement and held his breath. "Rex," she warned in a low but alert voice. The dog walked toward the fence. Each step was a struggle between instinct and memory. The part of him that had learned to attack first and ask questions later wanted to drive away this unknown creature, this potential threat. The other part, a part he had almost forgotten, was drawn to that scent like someone finding an old blanket that smells of home. Lily took another step, slowly, as if she were approaching a precipice. "Hello, Rex," she said, using the name with the sweetness of someone asking permission. "Do you remember me?" The word remember meant nothing to the dog, but the sound of the name, Rex, echoed like a bell in a rusty corner of his brain. The last time he'd heard that name spoken so tenderly had been in a different voice, deeper, more weathered by the world. Yet there was a subtle similarity in the melody, in the way the syllables were broken. "Rex, sir. Good boy. Take care of Lily." Rex stopped so close to the fence that his snout almost touched the metal. He stopped growling. He sniffed. Cheap soap, crayons, dried tears, and, hidden deep inside, the faint scent of Ethan clinging to the girl's memory, in the hugs, in the t-shirts she still wore to sleep. A strange sound escaped Rex's throat. It wasn't a bark. It wasn't a growl. It was a low, tight whimper, as if something inside him was trying to squeeze through a narrow tunnel. Lily, unaware that she was crying, slowly raised her hand. "Lily, don't touch me," Mark began instinctively. But something in Rex's silence stopped him. The dog did not back down. Her snout moved even closer to the bars. Her whiskers brushed against the cold metal. When Lily's fingers slid through the opening, there was a moment when every muscle in her body tensed. Two security guards, watching from a distance, held their breath. Barely a millimeter separated those teeth, capable of tearing the flesh from a child's hand. Instead of attacking, Rex closed his eyes. The smell, touch, small, fragile, familiar. He brushed his nose against her fingertips with a tenderness no one there would have thought possible. It was as if time had rewinded, and for an instant all the explosions, the shouted orders, the metallic corridors, everything vanished. There were only two things left: the backyard with its dirt floor, and the little girl who used to rest her head on his ribs while dozing in the shade of the tree, waiting for her father to arrive from the base. Lily sobbed, but did not withdraw her hand. "It's you," he murmured. "Of course it's you." Her palm trembled as she felt Rex's warm breath. Each exhalation was a small earthquake of emotion that coursed through her bones. She didn't need proof, documents, or anyone to tell her, yes, it's him. Her body knew. Her heart, then, had no doubt. Mark, who was watching, felt something inside him loosen, like a rope that had been taut for years. He had seen dogs react to their former trainers. He had witnessed reunions with former soldiers, but this was different. It was as if two halves of the same loss were recognizing each other. "Oh my God," she whispered, without realizing it. Rex opened his eyes again. Inside the amber was something new, or perhaps too old to have appeared since his arrival at the center. a soft, almost childlike glow that Mark recognized from archive videos where the dog was just a puppy in training. The girl continued speaking in a low voice, not caring that he didn't understand the words. "Dad considered you family. If anything happened, you'd stay behind to take care of our loved ones." She swallowed hard. I think you've had to take care of yourself all this time, haven't you?" The word family resonated in every corner of Rex's heart. Family was Ethan. Family was the smell of that house he sometimes went to between missions. Family was the boy who now smelled almost the same, only a little taller, a little sadder. He pressed his snout even tighter against his fingers and let out a long sigh, so deep it seemed to come from years of silence. It was the first time since his arrival at the center that Rex did not react violently to a stranger. Mark knew it better than anyone. He bore the marks of that first failed attempt on his body, a deep scratch on his forearm that almost required stitches. There were incident reports, a temporary caretaker bitten, another trainer nearly falling to the ground. Rex was, for all intents and purposes, considered a high-risk dog. But there, in front of a little girl with torn sneakers, that monster breathed as if he had finally found a place of rest. If that scene had been filmed, it would have gone viral on the internet. Upstairs, Alejandro Salgado was shaking hands with investors, discussing profitability, public image, and the importance of taking care of our four-legged heroes to maintain the company's reputation. He could hardly imagine that, at that very moment, underground, his foundation's most challenging project was being transformed before his very eyes. In the following days, Lily became almost a peaceful ghost wandering the halls. She wasn't formally allowed to be there every day, but she managed. She finished her homework as quickly as possible, took 2 buses, walked several blocks just to sit for half an hour outside Rex's door and chat. Initially, Mark tried to impose limits. "Lily, you can't come here every day. Your mother." "My mom works late," was the simple answer. "I'm not bothering anyone here. I'm just sitting with him." And so it was. She sat on the floor, using her backpack as a backrest, and took out folded sheets of paper and colored pencils that had survived from a shared pencil case at school. She began to draw. "Look, Rex," she said, pushing the drawing through the small opening at the bottom of the grate, where the food bowl usually went. "This is you, and this was my dad." 2 disproportionate scribbles, but full of intention. "And here, we're at the beach, see? Dad promised we'd go." Rex, curious, sniffed the papers. The smell of cheap ink, of recycled paper, of fingers tired of holding a pencil. Sometimes he put his paw under the grate, as if he wanted to get a closer look at the paper. Other times, he simply rested his chin nearby, observing. For Mark, this transformation was as clear as a wound healing. The daily logs began to change. Intense barking when strangers arrive became short barks that stop upon hearing the child's voice. Refusal to eat when there is external noise became eats normally during Lily's visit, even with ambient noise. However, Emily knew nothing about this. Until one day the phone rang, and Mark's voice on the other end of the line sounded hesitant. "Emily, we need to talk." She frowned automatically, her arm covered in flour. She worked part-time at a soup kitchen, helping prepare dinners for the elderly in the neighborhood. She had dark circles under her eyes, unlike before the war. Life had gone on, somehow, but always with something missing. "Mark, has anything happened with the child support case? Because I can't stand any more paperwork." "That's not it. It's about Rex." Emily froze. The name, in and of itself, was still a very painful wound. "I thought we agreed it was best not to get involved in this," she murmured. "After the funeral, after everything, seeing that dog without Ethan, I don't know if I can." Mark breathed a sigh of relief at the other end. "I understand, but, Emily, there's something you should know." He hesitated for a moment, then decided to be direct. Lily found her way downtown. She's been coming here almost every day. And Rex recognized her. The world changed. Emily gripped the phone so tightly that her fingers hurt. That? Images I had struggled to bury resurfaced. Ethan kneeling in the yard, placing Rex's paw in Lily's tiny hand and saying, in a ritualistic tone, "It's family, okay? If Dad's not here, he's there." It had always seemed beautiful and, at the same time, absurd to her. Not because she doubted the dog's loyalty, but because she didn't want her daughter to depend on promises made between a man and an animal before going to a place where people died every day. And then Ethan didn't return. Emily avoided any news about military dogs. When Mark told her that Billionaire Salgado's foundation had rescued some retired police dogs, including Rex, she declined the invitation to see them. "I don't want another funeral," he replied at the time. But now Lily was there, with him. "Has she been going alone?" Emily's voice came out higher than she intended. "Yes, and I'm sorry for not letting you know sooner. I was trying to figure out what was going on. At first I thought it was going to be dangerous, but, Emily," Mark searched for the words, "she's a different dog with her. She's eating better, sleeping better, howling less. In the last few days, she hardly barks aggressively anymore. She's recovering somehow." Emily leaned back against the kitchen wall, her eyes closed. Something inside her, a part that was first and foremost a mother, wanted to scream angrily, "How can they let my daughter go near a traumatized dog without my permission?" Another part, however, heard the word return. Returning. It wasn't Ethan. It never would be. But it was a fragment of the life they'd once had, of the family that had existed. And now, in a strange and painful way, it was reunited amidst the concrete, the bars, and the smell of disinfectant. "Come back tomorrow," Mark said quietly. "Come and see for yourself. If you think it's not good for her, I'll stop. I won't argue with you. But I'm asking you to see it." Emily took a deep breath, wiped the flour off her hands with a cloth, and looked around the communal kitchen. Pots, tired faces, carefully counted food. "Okay," he finally said, "tomorrow." The next morning, rain threatened from early on. Dark clouds gathered over the buildings, and the air had that metallic smell that precedes a storm. For some, it was simply the weather. For Rex, even miles away from any battlefield, every clap of thunder was, in reality, something more. Burst. He felt it even before the first drop fell. The hair on the back of his neck stood on end. The hallway light seemed to flicker. Perhaps it was just a memory. The distant sound of a truck driving through a puddle sounded like an armored vehicle on a wet dirt road. He began pacing restlessly, his breathing rapid. The bowl of food remained undisturbed in the corner. Mark watched the monitor intently. He already recognized those signals. "Damn it," he muttered. "The forecast didn't mention any storms today." Upstairs, Lily and Emily crossed the lobby together. The little girl was beaming with happiness, practically skipping with every step. Emily tried not to look too closely at the photos on the walls. When her eyes fell on a particular banner, herself, Ethan, and Lily years ago, at a memorial service with Rex sitting beside him, some random photographer capturing the moment, her breath caught in her throat for a moment. I didn't remember authorizing the publication of that photo, but there it was, frozen in time. Ethan smiling, proud, with his hand on Rex's back. Lily, too young to understand, holding a small plastic medal given to the children of heroes. Emily felt Lily's hand tugging at the hem of her blouse. "Mom, it's us." She nodded, holding back tears. "Yes, my love, it was us." Mark appeared in the hallway and, for a moment, stared at them. Emily carried on her shoulders the same history that Rex carried in his scars: loss, guilt, sleepless nights. "Thank you for coming," he said sincerely. "I'm only here to see with my own eyes what you're allowing," he replied, but his tone wasn't as harsh as his words. Lily, among them, only had one question. "Can we go with Rex?" Mark hesitated a little more than on previous days. "We can, but he's already restless today. The weather—" She looked up at the first clap of thunder in the distance. "It's affecting him. If he gets too agitated, we'll leave, understand?" Lily nodded decisively. Emily, on the other hand, jumped when the thunder echoed faintly in the building. Maybe another day would be better," she murmured uncertainly. But her daughter was already heading towards the elevator, pulling her by the hand. "Mom, I promise you he won't hurt me." Her eyes shone. "He knows me." Those 3 words echoed in Emily's head. He knows me. Who else in the world knew them as intimately as Ethan, and now perhaps an animal that had survived with him things she would never see? In Block C at that moment, Rex was no longer the calm dog he had been during the last few days of the visit. He was almost the same animal he had been when he arrived, his eyes always alert, his body tense, his tail stiff. Every clap of thunder, even muffled by the walls, was an invisible hand pulling him back to the day it all ended. I could see sand, even where there was only concrete. I could hear screams, even where there was only silence. I could smell the blood, even where there was only disinfectant. "Rex, down, stay still." Ethan's voice echoed, but Rex didn't know where it was coming from. He tried to obey, yielding his legs for a moment, but another clap of thunder made him jump, slamming hard against the fence, baring his teeth. When Mark opened the security door and saw that state, a wave of concern washed over him. "Perhaps it would be best if you and Lily stayed there," he told Emily, gesturing to the observation area behind the glass. "She's not well today. The weather. It brings back memories." However, Lily had already reduced the entire world to her level, focusing solely on that agitated figure behind bars. "That's why he needs us today," he murmured, without taking his eyes off the dog. Emily held her daughter's shoulder. "Let's not force it," she said, but something in Rex's expression, that raw, animalistic desperation, so similar to what she herself felt on rainy nights, kept her in her place. Mark entered first, speaking in a low voice. "Rex, it's me, Mark." The dog turned his head, his eyes scrutinizing him. He recognized him, but he wasn't reassured. "We're downtown, buddy. We're not there. Can you hear me? It's just the rain." A nearby thunderclap echoed. Rex howled. It was a heart-wrenching howl, a howl of loss, of mourning. The same howl that, some nights, echoed through the empty corridors, silencing the other dogs for a few minutes. Emily brought her hand to her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. She had never heard that sound so close. Lily instinctively took a step forward. "Rex!" He turned his head so quickly that Mark took half a step forward, ready to intervene. But when he saw the girl, something wavered in the dog's gaze. The fear didn't disappear, but it remained divided. Smell of explosion. The smell of blood. The scent of Ethan. The smell of cheap soap, crayons, tears. Family. Another clap of thunder tore through the air. Rex retreated to the back of the kennel, pawing at the floor, his chest heaving. He no longer saw the walls. He saw the road. He saw the moment everything had shattered. If he hadn't been confined there, he would have run around in uncontrolled circles. "He's going to get hurt," Emily murmured, her voice trembling. Lily clung to the bars so tightly that her knuckles turned white. "Dad," she whispered without realizing it. Rex heard that word, and something inside him, still clinging to the image of Ethan's body falling, collided with another image, the house. The gentlest order he had ever received. Take care of Lily. That day, before leaving on his final mission, Ethan knelt down, almost laughing. But the promise for Rex was seared into his heart. Care. The next clap of thunder was accompanied by a fleeting flash in the upper cracks of the block. The lights flickered for less than a second. To Rex, it was as if an artillery crater had exploded before his eyes. He jumped desperately, hitting his head against the railing and letting out a groan of pain. "That's enough," Emily said, taking 2 steps forward. "I'm not going to stand here and watch this." Mark tried to stop her, but she was already standing in front of the fence, next to Lily. Seeing her mother there, the little girl felt a surge of courage. She was no longer alone between the dog and the world. "Rex," Emily called, her voice breaking but firm. "It's me, Emily." The name resonated. Rex recognized that smell, though time had masked it with others. Exhaustion, cheap detergent, sleepless nights. He remembered that woman hugging Ethan upon his return, remembered her scent lingering on the man's shirt when he sometimes showed up at the base after a few days off. It smelled like home. He turned around, panting. 2 figures stood before the fence. The boy, now older, the woman, now more tired. But together, they gave off a scent that matched what he called, in canine language, my pack. Between the thunder and the subsequent silence, there was a pause. Lily put her hand under the grate, just like she had done the first day. "I'm here," he said softly. "I won't give you anything. I won't let anything happen to you." That phrase, uttered with the absurd force of a child who doesn't know how little he controls the world, struck a chord with Rex. He walked toward the fence, still trembling, and again touched his fingers with his snout. The contact seemed to anchor him. Seeing that, preserve the original language she hadn't felt since the funeral, a pang of hope mixed with almost unbearable pain. Finally, she wept, not only for the loss of Ethan, but for what she saw there, a part of him alive, pulsating, breathing, recognizing her. "Mark," she said, without taking her eyes off the dog, "what did they do with him after Ethan died?" The response came in fragments: different bases, temporary caregivers, adaptation failures, reports of assaults, stamps that said unsuitable for civilian housing, and, finally, a multi-million-dollar foundation seeking good publicity for caring for retired heroes, squandering money on concrete and steel structures, but without knowing what to do with broken souls. Mark told her what she needed to know, without going into the most gruesome details. Emily listened to everything, with Lily's hand always on Rex, as if, with that gesture, she were holding the thread that kept him in that moment. In the dog's mind, the storm continued to rage. But now there were 2 points of light, the 2 presences on the other side of the fence. He began to associate the sound of rain not only with the memory of the explosion, but also with the sensation of little fingers touching his snout, a soft voice telling him stories, and another voice, hoarser but familiar, calling him by name. The visits began with both of them, mother and daughter. At first, Emily was rigid, her gaze always alert, ready to step between her daughter and any sign of aggression. Over time, the tension transformed into something different. She began to talk, not to Rex, but to Lily, and indirectly to the void that Ethan had left behind. "Do you remember when your father left with that wonderful smell of sand and sweat? And you insisted on hugging him, and you said, 'First the bath, now the hugs.'" Lily laughed, and strangely, Rex seemed to react to that laughter more than to any formal command. The drawings were piled up on the walls next to the kennel. Mark, ignoring protocol, started sticking them there, creating a small, impromptu gallery. Rex running along the beach, Rex lying on a sofa, Rex wearing a superhero cape. Other employees thought it was corny. Some thought it was dangerously humanizing. But the clinical results were undeniable. Significant reduction in episodes of spontaneous aggression. A positive response to Lily's voice. Possible acknowledgement of a previous relationship with the trainer's family. One day, while flipping through an old file that had only been partially digitized, Mark found a nearly faded photograph. Ethan at home, wearing a t-shirt, sitting on the floor with little Lily on his lap and Rex lying beside him, his head resting on the man's leg. The little girl was holding Rex's ear with her chubby little hand, and the dog looked incredibly patient. Behind the photo, handwritten in pen, it read, "My family, Emily, Lily, and Rex." That's when everything finally clicked into place for Mark. It wasn't just that Rex was happier around a child. It was that, specifically, that child was part of his original pack. A dog's olfactory and emotional memory transcends human narratives. While Emily and Lily tried to recall lost moments, Rex perceived them as if they were happening again. The next day, Mark carefully carried the folded photo to the center. "I want to show you something." Lily picked it up carefully, as if it were something sacred. She was barely breathing. Emily, over her daughter's shoulder, brought her hand to her mouth again. I didn't remember this photo," she whispered. In the photograph, she herself looked like a different person, more rested, more full of life. Rex, on the other side of the fence, sniffed the air intently. The two women's emotions had a scent, so did the paper. He perceived, in that rectangle of cellulose, a wave of familiar things. Emily's perfume from years ago, Ethan's sweat on a hot day, Lily's scent of milk and baby powder, the dust from the backyard. He approached. Lily leaned the photo against the railing without thinking. "Look, Rex," she said, her voice trembling with joy. "This day was a day for us." The dog looked at the image. He didn't understand the concept of photography, but for a moment he saw his reflection there, without scars, younger. He sniffed again. The combination of old and current smells acted like a key turning in an internal lock. Family. It wasn't just a word, but a complete feeling. He let out a low sound, a mixture of crying and relief, pressing his snout against the photo, as if trying to cross over into time. Mark saw the tears streaming down Emily's face and decided, right then and there, that he had to do more. It wasn't enough to keep Rex confined to the luxurious basement of a multi-million-dollar foundation, not even with visits. If that dog had truly found his family again, what was the point of keeping him locked up until the end of his days? But between intention and reality lay a chasm called Alejandro Salgado. The billionaire didn't see Rex as someone with a track record and connections. He saw him as a complex asset, expensive, risky, and potentially useful for the institution's image. "Do you want to let our most expensive and troublesome dog live in an apartment in the suburbs?" asked Alejandro, amused and incredulous, when Mark, in an unusual direct meeting, explained the situation to him. "I want to return him to the family he should never have lost," Mark corrected. Alejandro smoothed down his jacket and looked out the window of his glass-walled office. Below, the city bustled with activity. He thought about figures, reports, headlines. A billionaire returns his hero dog to the family of a fallen soldier. That could be a good story. "And if it bites someone?" he asked. "That will be my responsibility." He only reacts aggressively to strangers in situations that upset him. With Emily, he's a different dog. Mark took a deep breath. "And I can train him to adapt. Continuous supervision, weekly visits. He's already too old for active duty. Keeping him here, it just prolongs the confinement." Alejandro slowly turned the chair around. "You're getting too involved, Mark." He did not deny it. "Maybe, but," she paused, "I know what it's like to come back from war and have no one waiting for you." She looked the billionaire in the eye. He has someone. That phrase echoed in the luxurious room for a few seconds. Alejandro wasn't insensitive. He had simply learned to weigh emotions with the same coldness with which he evaluated investments. There, however, the line separating them blurred. "I want to see that dog with the girl," he finally said. "If it's as extraordinary as you say, it might even be worth," he smiled slightly, "a good corporate video." Mark accepted the commitment, even with the pang of cynicism he sensed. On the day of the official visit, the center was prepared as if expecting a high-level inspection, which, in a way, it was. The cameras were set up, the staff on alert. Lily, however, knew nothing of this. For her, it was just another day with Rex. As he entered Block C, his heart beating at its usual cheerful rhythm, he didn't notice the growing crowd watching him. He only saw his friend behind the fence discreetly wagging his tail, a gesture that weeks before would have been unthinkable. "Hey, big guy," he laughed, "I'll put on another drawing for you." It was a more elaborate drawing. Her mother, Rex, and, slightly to one side, Ethan holding a surfboard. In the background, an exaggerated blue sea. "Dad's here too, but don't look at him." Rex sniffed paper and then looked at her. Perhaps, in his own way, he could see it. Alejandro, peering through the glass, crossed his arms, intrigued. The monster he'd heard about in the reports bore no resemblance to the dog that was now carefully sliding its paw under the grate, lightly brushing the toe of the girl's worn slipper, as if to make sure it was really there. "Incredible," he murmured. Mark noticed the opening. "Imagine a campaign about redemption, about bonds that not even war can break," he said, without any shame, using language that Alexander understood. "The hero who was reunited with his family. It's not just an image, it's true. We can transform a problematic case into a symbol." Alejandro continued watching. Had they recorded that moment, and in fact there was a security camera in the hallway, they would have seen the exact instant the billionaire made his decision. Not out of coldness, but out of a kind of calculation that, this time, coincided with a genuine act of justice. "Go ahead with the legal procedures," he finally said, "but I want a ceremony, an official one, with the press, a medal. The whole shebang. This dog won't leave here as a discarded problem, but as a retired hero." Mark nodded. Inside, he felt a warm relief. That same day, in another part of the city, the clouds gathered again, heralding rain. Rex, in his kennel, didn't seem to react with his usual panic. His mind was full of new things, smells, voices, routines. Now I had something to lose again. The night the storm finally hit, the worst was yet to come. The paperwork started moving. Foundation lawyers, social workers, special adoption forms for military dogs, psychological reports on Mark, home visits to Emily's house. Their house was small and simple. The bathroom tiles were chipped in places, and the living room had an old but clean sofa. On the walls were some old family photos, and now some drawings Lily had made with Rex. "I don't have much," Emily said, almost embarrassed, "but I have space, I have time, and I think he's suffered too much to be locked up." The social worker took many notes, peering over her glasses. In the end, however, no report could reflect what was truly at stake: 3 lives trying to rebuild a family around an absence. Meanwhile, the center was preparing for the grand medal presentation and Rex's official retirement ceremony. It would be a beautiful and well-organized event with representatives from the armed forces, speeches about heroism, and Alexander at the microphone. Lily had a simple dress, borrowed from her neighbor, and Emily a somewhat worn blouse she reserved for special occasions. Mark would wear a collared shirt. However, no one expected nature to decide to put on its own show that very day. The morning dawned heavy, with a gray, dense sky. The weather forecast predicted a moderate storm, nothing serious. But when the wind began to whistle between the buildings, carrying dry leaves and small debris, the noise unsettled the more sensitive dogs in the center. Rex, in particular, had been more agitated since the previous day. It wasn't the uncontrolled panic of before, but a nervous restlessness, as if he knew something important was coming, something that mixed fear and anticipation. Lily arrived earlier than expected, brimming with excitement. The guard at the entrance, used to this by now, let her in with a discreet smile. "Today's a great day, huh, little one?" "Yes," she almost jumped. "Today Rex is coming with us." That phrase sounded like a miracle. Mark, downstairs, was finalizing the details of the protocol. He had decided to try something new, taking Rex, on a leash and muzzle, for a walk around the inner courtyard so he could get used to the open space and the presence of other people before the ceremony. It was risky, but necessary. "Let's take it one step at a time, okay?" he murmured, carefully placing the muzzle on the dog. "I know you don't like it, but it's just for today, for safety." Rex tolerated it, albeit reluctantly. He trusted the man enough to endure the discomfort. Each click of the muzzle, each snap of the buckle, brought back memories of other gear: tactical collars, vests, harnesses. He associated them with work, with danger, but also with purpose. When Lily appeared in the doorway of the building, Rex's eyes immediately fixed on her. His tail twitched once, a short but noticeable movement. "Will they always put that on them?" he asked, pointing at the muzzle. "No," Mark said with a slight smile. "Only when we leave today. It's so everyone feels reassured. After that, if everything goes well, he'll just wear a regular collar at home." The world of home shone in her eyes. Outside, the storm raged fiercely, as if it had a life of its own. Thunder rumbled closer, and rain pounded against the windows. The wind tore a branch from a tree near the center's outer wall, knocking it down with a loud crack. The sound echoed through the hallways. Rex shuddered, but didn't fall into the same trance as before. He looked at Lily, as if searching for an explanation for the noise. "I'm here," he repeated, almost like a mantra. "Nothing's wrong." Mark took a deep breath. "Let's try going out to the inner courtyard," he announced to the team. "2 support people, 1 on each side. The main door is locked, and no one makes any sudden movements." They walked toward the exit of Block C. The corridor seemed narrower with so much pent-up emotion. Emily waited by the door, her heart pounding. As she watched the dog approach, she felt a mixture of pride and terror. Rex looked like a soldier ready for battle, even in retirement. The inner courtyard was surrounded by high walls. Medium-sized trees, a strip of grass, a few cement benches. The rain was falling heavily, staining the ground with small glistening puddles. The smell of wet earth filled Rex's nostrils. The smell of rain. Smell of mud. The scent of another life. He paused in the doorway, hesitant. The first nearby clap of thunder made his hind legs pull back slightly. The memory of the explosion flashed before him like lightning, but this time it didn't completely overwhelm him. A small hand held his leash, if only symbolically. Lily's, who was walking beside Mark, holding the auxiliary handle. "Together, yes?" she said. They took the first step towards the outside. The wind stung his eyes with cold drops. He blinked, confused. The yard seemed too big, too vulnerable. Without walls or fences, everything inside screamed danger. The muzzle, however, reminded him that he was still under human control. And the presence of Lily, Emily, and Mark formed a small circle of smells and sounds that, somehow, made the outside world seem less threatening. A flash of lightning tore across the sky, followed almost immediately by a clap of thunder. That's when everything happened at the same time. The noise was so loud that one of the dogs in the neighboring building began barking desperately. A distant alarm, malfunctioning due to the power surge, emitted a brief beep. A large branch, weakened by the wind, broke off from a taller tree and crashed into the garden with an even louder bang, striking a section of the wall and sliding to the ground, dragging down wires and other small objects. Lily jumped and let go of the auxiliary handle for a moment. Emily screamed her daughter's name. One of the security guards ran toward the branch to check if the wall had suffered serious structural damage. Rex, in the midst of all that, had the worst and the best vision at the same time. In the flash of the falling branch, she saw, for an instant, Ethan's body fall again. Her world trembled. The survival instinct, honed by years of combat, screamed inside her, "Run!" But in that same split second, he saw something else. Lily, smaller than the descending branch, slipping in a puddle, falling to her knees, vulnerable. The silent oath engraved in his mind since that distant day in the backyard resurfaced. Take care of Lily. There was no human command. Orders weren't shouted. There was no specific training for it. There was only love. Rex pulled with a force that surprised everyone. The leash, though firm in Mark's hands, tightened to its maximum. The muzzle, poorly fitted due to a hole in the leather that was more worn than expected, loosened at a crucial point. In a fraction of a second, the dog broke free from Mark's grip and the muzzle. For those who don't know the story, what they saw was a monster driven mad by the storm, loose in a yard, with a child lying on the ground. The screams came in a cascade. "Hold it! Lily! Rex, no!" But Rex wasn't running toward fear. He was running toward what he loved. He lunged straight at Lily, thrusting his body forward and slicing through the water with his legs. Just as a smaller piece of the branch, still heavy enough to cause serious injury, fell toward the girl, Rex leaped. There was a dull sound, wood hitting muscle and bone. Lily saw, above her, not the branch, but Rex's chest crossing her field of vision, large, dark, like a shield. She felt the impact shake the ground. Something hard grazed her leg. It hurt, but not enough to knock her unconscious. The barking that followed was not an attack. It was painful. Rex fell beside her, letting out an involuntary howl. The smaller branch, now broken, rolled a little further, stopping just inches from the girl's face. The larger one, now stabilized at a greater distance, creaked under the weight of the rain. The world froze. Emily ran towards her and knelt beside her daughter. "Lily, are you okay?" "Yes." Her voice trembled, but it was firm. "Mom, Rex!" The dog lay on its side, breathing heavily. A deep gash ran across its flank, from which blood quickly mixed with the rainwater. A harder piece of the branch had also struck one of its front paws, which was now at an awkward angle. Mark arrived a second later, and his trained eye was already assessing the damage, the severity, and the options. "I need a first aid kit here, right now," he shouted, "and call the clinic, surgery, urgent." Alejandro, who was observing everything from the covered balcony on the second floor, momentarily forgot the speech he had prepared. What he saw there was a hero, without quotation marks, without a pre-established script. Rex tried to get up. A sharp pain shot through his body like a knife. He staggered and fell again. His eyes searched, first for a threat. Finding none, they looked for Lily. There she was, just inches away, with scratches on her knees, but alive. Alive. She let out a moan, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was almost a sigh. Lily, ignoring the cries of "Don't touch me," threw herself onto his neck, hugging him as if he were the only anchor in the world. "You did it!" she cried. "You took care of me, like Dad said." Rex's blood stained the hem of her simple dress. Emily, despite her panic, didn't pull away. That embrace was, at once, a farewell, a thank you, and a promise. "Rex, stay with me," Mark said, pressing a makeshift bandage against the cut. "Stay with me, buddy. Don't go now." The dog was breathing with difficulty. The barking of the other dogs around him formed a distant chorus. The rain was falling heavily, but in that small circle of pain and love, the sound seemed muffled. He remembered another time when someone from his pack had fallen. He remembered the despair, the helplessness. He remembered howling until he collapsed. This time was different. This time he wasn't alone. There were human hands holding him. The scent of his family enveloped him. When the makeshift stretcher arrived, it took them a while to get Lily off of him. "Don't let him!" he shouted.
"I'm going with him," Mark promised. "I won't leave his side." Emily hugged her daughter tightly, pulling her back as they took Rex inside, towards the veterinary clinic attached to the center. The hallway, which had so often been a place of fear for the dog, was now, strangely, a tunnel leading to an opportunity. On the clinic table, the bright lights dazzled him slightly. The veterinarian's cold hands ran over his body, examining him, giving him injections, cleaning him. Their voices overlapped. Fracture in the right front leg. Deep laceration on the flank. He lost a lot of blood. He's in shock. Words meant nothing to Rex. He smelled of alcohol, plastic, latex. And beneath it all, the scent that enveloped him. Mark, right there, with a firm hand on his head, murmuring under his breath things less important than the tone in which he spoke them. "You're not leaving, do you hear me?" the man said, almost as an order. "Not after all. They're waiting for you. Lily is waiting for you." The sedation came like a warm wave. For a moment, Rex fought it instinctively. Dogs at war can't afford to faint. But remembering Lily's face, her touch, Emily's scent, Ethan's laughter in the yard, he let the darkness envelop him. "If I were to die, I would die with those smells etched in my mind." Outside, in the makeshift waiting room, Lily paced back and forth. Her hands, stained with blood that the water had washed away, remained red in her memory. Emily tried to get her to sit down, but the girl seemed disoriented. "It'll be okay, right?" he kept asking. Nobody dared to lie, nor to tell the harsh truth. The hours dragged on. The storm subsided outside. First the wind, then the rain, then the thunder. In the sky, a timid patch of blue began to appear. In the hearts of those people, not yet. When the head veterinarian left the room, snapping off his gloves, Lily ran towards him with wide eyes. "How are you?" He looked at Emily, then at Mark, and then at the girl. "He's a warrior," she said, choosing her words carefully. "The surgery was long. We managed to control the bleeding and stabilize the fracture. But," she took a deep breath, "now it all depends on him. The next 24 hours are critical. If his heart holds up, he has a very good chance." If the heart can bear it. Lily felt her own heart contract so much that it seemed as if it was going to stop too. "Can I?" he asked. "Just a moment," the doctor conceded, moved by the sincerity of that pain. "But only you, and without touching, okay? It's full of wires." She nodded as she walked away. Emily wanted to go with her, but stopped at the door. That scene might be too much for her. However, staying outside was too cruel a punishment for a mother. Torn between two options, she took a step back. "Go, Lily," he finally said. "He needs you." Inside, the bright white light highlighted every bandage, every tube, every monitor. Rex looked smaller, huddled under all the equipment. He had a leg in a cast and his flank bandaged, yet his chest still rose and fell. Lily approached slowly, the sound of the heart monitor ticking away the time with spaced beeps. "Hey, big guy," he whispered, "you look ugly, huh? But you're still the most valuable dog in the world." She stopped just inches from him, respecting the rule. Her hands itched to touch him, but she remained silent, tears falling quietly. "If you were to," her voice broke,
It would be like losing your father all over again, and I don't know if I can handle this. So I asked you, please stay with us. I promise there won't be any more horrible wars. Just ugly couches, sometimes not so great food, and awful cartoons of the beach." She laughed through her tears. The sound that room had never heard before was the most beautiful and sad at the same time. Rex, lost in the darkness of sedation and pain, heard distant voices like echoes in a water tunnel.
Some he didn't recognize. Others, however, reached him as clear as water. Lily's, above all. A thin, firm voice that refused to let him go. I wandered through a strange place, between memories and possibilities. She was back in the backyard. The sun was beating down. Ethan was playing ball. Lily, the youngest, was laughing. Emily was calling for lunch. The world was simple. She knew exactly who to protect, where to lie down, what to expect the next day. Then the scene changed. Sand, explosions, shouted orders. The earth shook. Ethan's body fell in slow motion. He ran, but his paws seemed stuck in the mud. He howled, but no one heard him. The world ended. Finally, another image. A concrete corridor, an older girl, a sadder woman, a tired man, all looking at him through a grate. And, above all, that little hand reaching out, that light touch on his snout. His heart faltered. If I followed the path of pain, it would be easier to let it go, to free myself from it.
To let the good memories remain frozen in that old backyard. But the image of Lily hugging him around the neck in the courtyard, his blood staining her dress, the sound of her voice begging him to stay, all of it haunted her. Dogs don't think in terms of the future. They think in terms of presence, of smells here and now. And there, at that point between one heartbeat and the next, the most intense scent he had was hers, lingering in his own fur, in the bandages, in the air. He decided to stay. The next morning, when the sun finally came out without a cloud in the sky, the first thing Lily heard as she entered the clinic with a new drawing in her hand was the slightly faster and more steady sound of the heart monitor. The veterinarians, tired but satisfied, smiled discreetly. "He spent the night here," they said. "That's a good sign." Lily ran to the glass partition. Rex was still lying there, but this time his eyes were open. They were pale from the medication, but he was still there. When he saw her, he wagged his tail once, weakly but sincerely. He rested his forehead against the glass. "I knew you were a Rosario," he laughed, "just like Dad." The recovery was long. There was physiotherapy, sessions to adapt the partial use of the injured leg, and painkillers. Lily and Emily were there every step of the way. Mark was there too, often after his workday. When the day of the ceremony finally arrived, the sky was clear, almost as if the universe had decided to bestow that symbolic gift. Alejandro organized everything with great pomp. A tent set up in the inner courtyard, chairs lined up, a small makeshift stage. A few select journalists were present, cameras at the ready. Dogs in less complex rehabilitation attended as a silent audience. Rex, still with a slight limp in one leg, walked with his collar and a blue bandana around his neck. No muzzle. To the public, he was a hero with a happy ending. In Lily's eyes, he was simply Rex. When they announced his full name, K9 Rex, war hero, lifesaver, there was a few timid claps. Alejandro gave a beautiful speech about sacrifice, about how those animals gave everything without asking for anything in return, about moral responsibility. Mark listened, knowing that behind every word there was a real creature who still had nightmares about Thunder, a girl who took 2 buses every day to visit him, a woman who had rediscovered a part of her husband in that scarred snout. When they placed the symbolic medal around Rex's neck, Lily couldn't take her eyes off him. And he, in turn, seemed to be looking only at her, as if everything else was just noise. At the last moment, Alejandro, with a rehearsed smile, officially handed the reins to Emily. "From today onward, it is his again," he said to the microphones. "May he find at home the peace that the battlefield never gave him." Emily gripped the leash with trembling hands. For a moment, she looked at Mark, at Lily, at Rex. The weight of that gesture was enormous. It wasn't just about bringing a dog home. It was about acknowledging, at last, that her story with Ethan hadn't ended at the cemetery, but was still unfolding there. "Welcome home, Rex," she whispered. Lily threw herself into his arms, this time with no one to stop her, no barriers, no fear. Rex's body followed her, even with his still tender paw. He licked her face once, quickly and awkwardly, like someone unaccustomed to public displays of affection, but unable to resist. Camera flashes captured that moment. Later, videos circulated with eye-catching titles like "The War Dog Reunited with the Daughter of the Fallen Soldier." There were tears from the public, comments, and shares. But none of those visualizations could truly capture what was happening, night after night, inside that small apartment where, now, 3 living beings were learning to sleep with less fear. During the first few days, Rex explored the space thoroughly. Every corner had a different smell, a story. The sofa smelled of Emily and sleepless nights, Lily's bed of cheap shampoo and dreams, the kitchen of simple food, but made with love. He chose a corner between the hallway and the front door as his lookout post. From there he could see who came in and who went out. At night he lay there, his head between his legs, but unlike at the military base, he didn't wait for explosions. He waited for the sound of the key in the lock, which now always came with laughter, with a "I'm home." On rainy nights, his body still reacted. The first clap of thunder after the move made him jump, his heart racing. Instinctively, he ran to Lily's room, where her scent was strongest. He found her already standing, eyes wide open, hand on her chest. "I'm scared too," she admitted, for the first time out loud. Instead of curling up alone in a corner, Rex jumped onto the bed. After Emily's initial protest, which she eventually relented on, and lay down beside her. His weight on the bed, the warmth of his body, the sound of his steady heartbeat, all acted as an antidote to the outside noise. Lily stroked his back, feeling the scars under the fur. "When it sounds like this," she said, referring to the thunder, "I think of Dad. I think about what I have to hear before—" The sentence trailed off. Rex took a deep breath. His muscles tensed reflexively, but when the next clap of thunder sounded, instead of running, he rested his head more firmly on his legs. If there was something to fear, he would fear it with her. If there was something to protect, he would protect it. They were both trembling. They both remained motionless. Emily, leaning against the doorframe, watched silently, sometimes joining them, lying down for a moment on the edge of the bed, forming a small group of vulnerable and brave bodies facing painful memories with the only thing truly capable of healing them, presence. Mark continued to visit them occasionally, both as a friend and as a professional. Sometimes he brought durable toys for Rex, other times just coffee and news from the center. Upon seeing him, the dog would wag his tail sincerely, but he always returned to Lily and Emily as if to say, "My place is here." One day, Lily showed up with some news. "The teacher asked us to write about a hero for school," he said, sitting on the living room floor with his notebook in his lap and Rex lying beside him. "Everyone's talking about movie superheroes, about famous people. I'm going to write about you, Rex." He raised his head, curious, not understanding the words, but attentive to the tone. "I'm going to decide that a hero isn't just the one who fights in a normal war, it's the one who, even though they're afraid, even though they're here." jumps over the storm to save someone. It's the one who, he thought for a moment, is family, even if we don't share the same blood. Emily, who was listening from the kitchen, smiled with tears in her eyes. "And what will you say about your dad?" she asked in a low voice. Lily looked at Rex, then at her mother. "That he's the first hero, and that Rex, he's the hero who never lets go of him. That when I saw him, I felt that Dad was still taking care of our children, only now he was on 4 legs." Rex tilted his head, as if trying to decipher that mixture of sadness and gratitude. He felt, without understanding it, that by being there, he was helping to unite something invisible between mother and daughter, between past and present. Years later, when the scars on his flank were just pale lines under his gray fur, and his injured paw reminded him on cold days of the storm that almost took him away, Rex spent most of his time sleeping on the living room carpet, with dreams more peaceful than the nightmares of before. Lily, a teenager studying at the makeshift table, would still occasionally come down to lie beside him on the floor, her face buried in his aging fur. "Thank you for not going that day," he murmured. "Otherwise, I don't know where I'd be now." Emily, now older, still saw a reflection of Ethan in every one of his movements. The way he tilted his head, the way he stood on the balcony at sunset, gazing at the horizon as if he could see further than anyone else. When the day of the final farewell inevitably arrived, there were no explosions, no thunder, no metal corridors. There was a worn sofa, an old blanket, 2 women, one young, the other older, and a dog lying between them, breathing slower than ever, but still surrounded by the only smell that truly mattered, the smell of family. In that final breath, if there were a place where memories could be sorted, the one at the top of his list would probably be simple. An ordinary afternoon, no war, no billionaires, no cameras. Just Lily drawing on the floor, Emily laughing in the kitchen, Ethan walking through the door, and him, Rex, lying among them all, alert and at peace, knowing, with the quiet certainty only dogs possess, that love, once recognized, is never truly lost. And somewhere out there, wherever the weary heroes of war rest, perhaps Ethan smiled to see that, despite everything, his most important order had been fulfilled. Take care of Lily. Rex took care of it. And in the end, she was the one who saved him first.